Hello, my name is Michael Schultz, and today you'll be hearing my voice and
Dominic Petty.
And Sophia Pangala.
um, just a disclaimer here, these stories were not necessarily meant for our voices. They are tales from Native Americans around here, and we are not Native Americans. Okay, that was that. Oh,
The Woman Who Became a Horse, a Salish legend.
A chief had many horses, and among them a stallion which his wife rode often. The woman and the stallion became enamored of each other. The woman grew careless of her household duties and always wanted to look after the horses.
when the people moved camp and the horses were brought in, it was noticed that the stallion made right for the woman and sniffed about her as stallions do with mares. After this, she was watched. When her husband learned the truth, he shot the stallion. The woman cried out and would not go to bed.
At daybreak, she was gone. No one knew where. About a year after this, it was discovered that she had gone off with some wild horses. One day, when the people were traveling over a large open place, they saw a band of horses, and the woman among them. She had partly changed into a horse. She also had much hair on her body, and the hair of her head had grown to resemble a horse's mane. Her arms and legs had also changed considerably, but her face was still human, and bore some resemblance to her original self.
The chief sent some young men to chase her. All the wild horses ran away, but she could not run as fast as they, and was run down and lassoed. She was brought into her husband's lodge, and the people watched her for some time, trying to tame her, but she continued to act and whinny like a horse. At last they let her free. The following year they saw her again. She had become almost entirely horse, and had a colt by her side. She had many children afterwards.
This is Coyote and the Giant, a Salish legend. Near Spokane one day, Coyote and Fox were traveling together on their way north. When they reached a river, Coyote said to Fox,
I believe I'll get married. I'd like to take one of those Penn Oriel women for my wife.
So they decided to go in search of the chief of the Pendiorials. They soon located him with his tribe, and Coyote approached him with a gift of a salmon.
Chief, I would very much like to have one of your tribal women for my wife. Can we talk about which one you would choose for me?
Now, Coyote, you know we do not approve that our women intermarry with other tribal members, so you cannot have one of our Pendorelli women for your wife.
Coyote and Fox left the chief. Coyote became so disappointed with the chief's decision, he began to rage to his partner Fox.
Soon, the chief will be sorry for his refusal. I'll make a big waterfall here in his big river. Forevermore, salmon will not be able to get over the falls to feed the Penn Oriel.
Since Coyote had the power for his wishes to be granted, the Great Falls immediately formed as he had proclaimed. This is how the Spokane Falls began. From there, Coyote walked north to Rivali. Soon he met an old Indian woman camped close by. Old woman said to Coyote,
Where are you going?
I am on my way to travel all over the world.
Well, you had better go back and not stay here,
Why should I turn back and not stay here for a while? I'm looking for a wife.
because there's a giant here who kills everyone passing through this valley.
But I am strong. I will fight him and kill him instead.
So Coyote did not heed Old Woman's warning and started walking on the trail again. He noticed a large tamarack tree nearby on a hillside.
I'll kill the giant with a hard blow from this tree.
Coyote said to himself. So he pulled the tamarack tree from the ground and swung it onto his shoulder and continued his search for the giant. Soon, Coyote saw a woman who seemed nearly dead. He asked,
What is the matter? Are you sick?
No, I am not sick.
I'm going to kill the giant with this tamarack tree.
You might as well throw the tree away. Don't you know the giant already sees you and you are already a tasty bite in the giant's belly?
Coyote took her advice and threw the tamarack tree up on a hillside where it is still growing near Arley, a little station on the Northern Pacific Railroad. All of what was Jocko Valley now fills the giant's belly. As Coyote traveled on from there, he observed many people lying here and there. Some were already dead, others seemed about to die or were nearly dead.
Tell me, what is the trouble with all of you people?
Asked Coyote of an old woman with her eyes open.
We are all starving to death.
She answered.
How can that be? when I can see plenty to eat here, lots of meat and fat.
Then Coyote attacked the giant and cut away large chunks of grease and fat from the sides of the giant and fed all of the people. Soon all became well again.
All of you people prepare to run for your lives. I'm going to cut out the giant's heart. When I start cutting, you must all run to O'Keefe's Canyon or to Rivali.
With his stone knife, Coyote cut out the giant's heart. The giant called out,
Please, Coyote, leave me alone. Go away from here. Get out.
No, I won't go away. I'm going to stay right here until I kill you.
Then he cut out the giant's heart. As he was dying, the giant's jaw began to close tightly. Woodtick was the last one to escape from the giant's belly when the giant's jaws closed. But Coyote caught hold of him and with all of his strength pulled Woodtick out of the giant's mouth.
We can't help it, but you will always be flat-headed from your experience,
said Coyote as he left and started again on his world trip.
From there, the traveler continued on to what is today Missoula, Montana. Coyote walked along between Willow and Fort Missoula when he thought he heard someone call his name, but he could not see anyone. He trotted forward again and heard his name called again. He stopped, and when he looked into the woods, he saw two women sitting down beside a river. Coyote swam across the river and went up to the embankment of the women, but they stood up and danced down to the river.
Wait for me. I'll go swimming with you.
He took off his jacket beaded with shells, denoting that he was a great chief.
We don't want to wait. We are having a good time dancing,
replied the two women as they danced on into the river. When Coyote joined them, they pushed him down into the river and tried to drown him. Later, Coyote's partner Fox appeared from around a bend in the river, looking for something to eat. When he looked into the river and saw something lying on the bottom, he said,
This must be my partner, Coyote.
Fox pulled out the object, and when he was sure it was Coyote, he made a magical jump over him and brought him back to life. Coyote said,
Oh, I must have been asleep a long time.
You were not asleep, you were dead. Why did you go near those women? You had no right to be near them. They are from the Shell tribe.
Coyote climbed partway up the hill and set the grass on fire. Later it was discovered that the women could not escape and died in the fire. Today, some shells have a black side, because they had been burned at the same time.
Blue Jay's Skinny Legs, a Flathead Legend.
It happened a long time ago, before the arrival of the White brothers and sisters. There was a chief who had a very beautiful daughter. He wanted to make sure that she married a strong and healthy man. As the young men began to come around to flirt with his daughter, he became worried. He decided to reduce the odds by having a race. He informed all the young men that the one with the strongest legs could marry his daughter.
Coyote was crafty and a good runner with a lot of power, so he came first. He showed how long his legs were and how fast he could run. Then Deer came, a very handsome and strong buck. He showed how powerful his legs were at jumping, although they were somewhat knotted up. Then Grizzly Bear came along. Bear stood up and growled so everyone could see that he had very powerful and strong legs, so he claimed the girl.
But Blue Jay hollered that it was not fair, that others should still be considered. While the others were showing their legs, he hid behind an old log, where he had gathered a lot of tree moss and used clay to pack it around his legs. They looked larger and stronger than anyone's, even bigger than Grizzly Bear's. But to sweeten the pot, Blue Jay also offered all kinds of beautiful feathers he had obtained from all of his different bird relations. The old chief was fooled by this and let his daughter go with him. Blue Jay had to carry his wife across the stream in order to reach his teepee on the other side. As he began the hard journey, the water softened the moss and clay, so they fell from his legs.
When he climbed up on the other side of the stream bank, everyone began to laugh. Grizzly Bear came down and claimed his prize, and with his strong legs carried his new wife up the side of the mountain. Any time he tries to come back and visit, the Blue Jay will start squawking all over the forest, and he makes a terrible noise. He does this because he is jealous and doesn't like to be laughed at. Okay, so you just heard 3 different stories or so. From Dom, Sophia, and I. And so now we're just going to talk about what we saw a little bit. And I've prepared a couple of questions to help guide us, but our conversation may vary.
It'll be an adventure.
Yeah, it'll be a historilog or something, a travel log, but hauntology, something like that. Anyway, my first question is, what rhetorical legacies did you guys see? And in that, I just mean like, what do you see, like messages that were in it, morals, like trying to teach kids the lesson, or other things that
Well,
anyone can pick up?
the one I could think of was like to explain a natural phenomenon when they mentioned, I think it was the one with the giant,
Hmm.
where it was how the falls were made,
Yeah,
which I didn't know that story, and that's like, I mean, I think that's the point of this assignment, kind of like you don't know the things just in your backyard with the history that's around them, and I think that's kind of an interesting kind of piece of, I don't know, history and the background of the area that you wouldn't know, even though you know about the falls a bunch. You see it and you don't know what the native people thought of it.
yeah, I thought so too. Especially at the end of that story with the coyote lighting the fire, and then it burned the seashells
Yeah, the
to
same
explain
thing.
some
Yeah.
of the seashells that are. Yeah. So, did you guys see the metis in Coyote at all? Like, Coyote was a little bit like tricky in some ways, but did you really see that come out here in any of the stories that we read,
Um,
or
I don't know. I mean, he didn't win the race.
no?
First off, I mean, Bear won it
Yeah.
first outright, and
Mhm.
then the Blue Jay came in. So
Well, even then, the Blue Jay, like the Blue Jay, I think might be the closest thing that we got to seeing the
yeah,
metis,
I would
but
say
then it
more.
didn't work, right? Like everybody laughed at him. Like that was the message of the piece was Blue Jay just gets laughed at now forever.
And Blue Jay remind me exactly of what's the Greek one where he flies too close to the sun and his wings.
Oh, Icarus.
Yeah, I mean the same thing. They melted off of him right once he got actually into it, and I don't know. I don't know. It's just interesting to see kind of similarities cross culturally when you look at historical rhetoric.
Yeah, and the fact I think that the fact that the Blue Jay lost too is important because even though like this story kind of puts down the metis the same ways that we might think of somewhere in like Pluto or Socrates did in their writings, where you do have to be like the best physical specimen in order to
Hmm.
properly be given what's deserved of you.
Exactly. Well, wasn't it the gazelle who they said it had knotted legs,
Hmm.
which that was just like Epimenides, right? He had the knotted legs like
Yeah,
that.
with Hephaestus and
Or
stuff. Yeah.
Hephaestus. Oh yeah,
Mhm.
my bad, my bad.
What did you guys think? So this was something I noticed is that women weren't really, they were very much commoditized in the stories too.
Oh,
Because
completely.
Coyote was like, I want to find a wife. And then Fox
Or
was like, you don't have the right to talk to those women specifically.
or how much the chief was involved in his own daughter's marriage and,
Mhm.
and deciding which men were allowed to even be considered by her based off their race.
Also, in the woman who became a horse, when they couldn't find the man's wife, they like went out to find her, and then they just kind of like lassoed her back. And even though she was acting like a horse, they're treating her like she's like his property. And yeah, that's just kind of interesting. And then yeah, same with the.
No, I think that's a good point, though. I think that's a good point, though, about lassoing her back like that. That
Yeah.
even if she wasn't turning into a horse, she was still lassoed to him and not free like she wanted to be, like the other horses that she wanted to just run with.
And then we also see in the Coyote and the Giant story, the women end up killing Coyote. And Coyote's supposed to be the hero of the story. So it goes back to, again, like what we saw in the Dolmage piece, where um, the feminine is the villain in a way.
Completely.
Um, I had another idea for a question. Hold on.
And you can just edit out anything we say. Right?
Yeah. Oh, okay. So why don't we talk about for a second how we like just gave these stories, because one of the things is like we tripped up a lot while we were going through these
Yeah, I mean,
stories.
we had to practice saying the name of the tribe itself that
Mhm.
wrote this
Yeah,
story.
the-
The fact that the people that wrote this story that we can't even say it correctly goes to show that it wasn't made for us really in any
Mhm.
way.
I mean, we're just kind of committing linguistic terrorism in a
Yeah,
way.
just like we talked with Dr. Mori completely.
Like even though we're doing these stories and looking at them and
With a genuine good effort.
yeah, like trying to talk about the legacies behind them, like we still can't say the words, and the stories don't have the right flow. And I feel like that's
You can tell even the language is just
Mhm.
not right in the translation.
right, exactly, because these aren't meant to be in English, and they're not meant to be spoken by our untrained tongues, um, and I think that's important to consider we're looking at these stories because, like, yeah, you guys
Yeah,
picking up what I'm putting down.
Completely.
Yeah.
You can just end that when you say it's important to look at these stories.
Yeah.
That's a good spot.
What other reading should we talk about?
Oh, so one of the things that
Because
I
I'm
wanted
trying
to
to
think is, so do you guys see the Ansla Dala in here at all? Where I'm just thinking about like the
I'm not really sure because I don't really. There's a lot of that with me was concerned with borders. I felt like, and I
Mhm.
don't really see that kind of discussed here, except for actually when they talk about the white man coming in and kind of ruining things. Is I feel like the only time we really see anything about a border or other lands connecting.
but we do see things where like what Coyote goes to these different tribes and they're like,
It's
no,
true.
these
He's
are
an
our
outsider for them.
yeah, these are our women, and like you can't have these. And Fox says you can't talk to those women or the seashell women,
Mm-hmm.
whatever they were called, or whatever the name of their tribe was.
Even the giant, like anyone who passed through the valley that he was in, he would kill immediately for like trespassing
Oh,
his
completely. Yeah.
space.
And I think so. I know this is a little bit different than what we just said, but that goes back to again the metis, the rhetorical, where Giant is a monster, and Coyote has to kill this monster in order for everybody to be happy.
But
when
if you look at it from
the Giant's
the
perspective,
Giants' perspective, he's what is he doing wrong? You know,
Mhm.
he's just here at his own place. He's got the rules already set out. Don't come in or you get killed.
and in fact, he's he ends up like just crying for help. It's the only words we hear from him is him
That's
crying
his
for
own.
Coyote not to.
Those are
not
his
to
only
kill him.
lines. Yeah.
Coyote
And
cuts his heart out.
I will fight him and kill him anyway.
And then, like killing the giant caused all of the life in what is it, the Jocko Valley,
Mm-hmm.
causes to happen. Like it all comes from Giant's belly. Yeah, it's interesting to consider.
From Coyote killing the giant.
Coyote had to kill the giant in order for all of this nature to be enabled.
To be good to them.
Yeah. So, what kind of like cultural values and identity did you guys see coming up in these stories?
Well, what I can think of is when the chief was deciding who was allowed for his daughter, he didn't devise any kind of intellectual test. It was completely based off the physical aspect. It was come and see who's the fastest, you know, not the best witted. Where even in that case, like we were saying, Coyote was probably the most clever out of the bunch. He could have won something like that, but it was just based off, you know, speed, strength of legs.
And I think it also something to consider is that how all the humans are described, except for the horse story where they make a distinct distinction between humans and the horses. All of the humans are described either as animals or with just
in conjunction with
yeah. Because, I mean, think about Coyote. Like Coyote he's a
Once he
coyote,
goes swimming with the women,
right?
though.
But he goes swimming with women, and he's able to cut out a heart using a knife, and it doesn't say anything about him. Like, so he has to have human qualities. But that I think that speaks to just how entwined
the animal was with the human.
Yeah.
I mean, especially I don't know specifically too much about this tribe, but the whole spirit animal aspect that you were a man, but you also had an animal aspect in you, and it was what animal that was that helped define you. And I think a lot of these stories help spell that out for them.
And I think another thing to consider is how these stories were used to explain the world around them. So if you look and you see this in like Aesop's fables too, where these stories are explaining why the falls exist, why these particular seashells are black on one side, why the ticks have flat heads, because of these stories, right? This is their way of explaining the world around them as much as it is trying to teach certain
The
lessons.
tamarack tree too. That was another one.
Yeah. So it just shows the intertwining of nature and rhetorical legacy in regards to these tribes.
Well, when we talked about in class about like who's the ideal like man, like physically, like everything was just like physical. Like he had to be strong, he had to be big, he had to be like pretty.
To be a grizzly bear.
Yeah, and there was no talk about anything other than just the physical qualities, I guess. And that's kind of what we see in all these stories here. Even when they're talking about the woman who turns into a horse, they focus on her looks and how she had grown out her hair a lot more than how she's acting. Which I feel like how she's acting is a lot more important than just how she grew out her hair.
True, and her hair was more after the fact. She was already acting like a horse. They were already having to try and tame her like a horse.
Yeah.
And it was only after they let her act the way she wanted to act, but then her hair began to grow like a horse, and the physical followed.
So it's kind of like your who you are and your physical embodiment can be something that you whatever you want it to be. So that, like, I feel like in that story we see a lot more that the physical is as much mental as it is your appearance. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be suppressed in you, but it's only once it's allowed to be
It's like embracing
actualized.
the wolf. She embraced the horse.
Yeah, once it can be actualized is when then you can actually see that form of the way.
But again, it's important to mention that that's looked down on, right? Like she was ostracized for that. So even in the same way that medieval Europe tried to suppress the wolf, here they're trying to suppress how much nature you're allowed to have inside of